Good evening, everyone, and welcome, KSD community members. Thank you for your willingness to connect and engage with us tonight. We are proud of our school district, and we recognize that you could be anywhere virtually this evening, and we're glad you chose to be here. Our KSD Virtual Boundary Review Community Meeting is a necessary part of the reboundary process. Today, our team members will provide important information related to our planning process and share with you the why and the how our school district boundaries will be changed. You will experience what other students, families, staff, and stakeholders during our past community events have experienced as well. Now, in general, the purpose of any school boundary review process is to adjust school attendance zones within a school district. This process becomes necessary when attendance zones have either grown or in some cases decreased as compared to the student capacity of the schools within a district. Now, this is a common process in school districts across the country, and it may occur when a new school is built, as is the case in Kent School District, or when one is closed, but may also occur due to other shifts in population. Now, these school district boundary adjustments are necessary not only to balance enrollment, but also to coordinate school bus routes. We recognize that any change can bring about some anxiety and concern, and we also know that providing timely and relevant information is an important way to help reduce some of those anxieties or concerns. It can also be an exciting time for a school district. In fact, we are excited to open a new elementary school in the fall of 2021, funded by the 2016 bond issue. As a result, we will need to revise our current school attendance boundaries. So what does that mean? Well, the new elementary school's opening will help reduce overcrowding in some schools and eventually help balance enrollment district-wide. More than 12 years have passed since our last boundary change in 2008. Enrollment has increased and decreased at schools across our district. Student and community demographics have changed, and various educational programs and delivery methods have progressed. This summer, our board commissioned MGT Consulting Group to evaluate our attendance boundaries in our school district. Now, on Wednesday, December 2nd, our school board reviewed the interim report in an open session. Tonight, you will hear more about the findings and the proposed boundary changes from their study and have an opportunity to share your thoughts and your feedback. I encourage you to keep in mind that this is a process, and the community engagement we are undergoing now is one very important part of this process. The final decisions will be made when our board takes action to adopt the final proposal. So with that, I thank you for your time, your attention, and your participation in this process. I will now turn it over to our Chief School Operations Academic Support Officer, Mr. Israel Vela, to share some brief remarks and introduce our MGT partners. Israel?
Thank you, Dr. Watts. Again, I would also like to welcome our Kent School District community this evening. I wanted to share with you a little bit of an overview of where we've been throughout the process of our boundary analysis. We started on July 22nd when our board formally approved an RFP for several different consultants. We had a rigorous interview process which led to us selecting our partners, MGT Consulting Group. They have been hard at work. They formally started their work on August 26th. Since that time, they've been working hard, everything from working on with our staff, with community. They've been working on surveying the Kent School District community. They also have done other things like visit our school district on October 25th. They spent time to really take a look at our 72 square miles and see exactly where our schools were positioned and what the work, the boundary analysis work, would curtail. With that said, I wanted to now introduce Rob Tanner, who will be talking a little bit more about this evening and also introduce his team. Rob.
Thank you, Israel. It's our pleasure to be here tonight. Like Israel said, my name is Rob Tanner. I will be the presenter tonight for the presentation. Also with me from NGT is Dr. Casey Price. She will be moderating the chat. So if you have questions, please, or concerns, please put those in the chat. We'll be answering them as quick as we can. Know that any questions that we don't get to, they will be reviewed and added to the frequently asked questions page on the web page on the Kent website as quickly as possible. So the agenda, of course, we've already done the introductions. We'll have some brief ground rules. Excuse me. We will then have a summary of the interim report, followed by some engagement questions where you will be able to answer questions via your personal computer or your cell phone. We use a software system called Poll Everywhere, and you'll be able not only to answer the questions, but you'll be able to see the answers in real time. And then lastly, we'll have a closing. Ground rules. First thing I'd like to say is that we are translating this into multiple languages. So I will be reading each slide. Normally, I wouldn't read all the slides. I'll read everything on a slide. But for those translation purposes, I will be reading each slide. This session is being recorded. Moderators will be observing the chat thread and taking notes to record your feedback. No one will be identified in the report. We will utilize Poll Everywhere, which will allow you to provide input via your PC or your cell phone. Your facilitator will take time to pause and allow people to respond to the question. And everyone's views are valuable, and there is no right or wrong answer. So what is the school boundary? The Census Bureau definition is attendance boundaries, sometimes known as school catchment areas, define the geographic extent served by a local school for the purpose of student assignment. School district administrators create attendance areas to help organize and plan district-wide services. And districts may adjust individual school boundaries to help balance the capacity of local schools with changes in the local school age population. So why boundary review and why now? Currently in the Kent School District, the policy has not been updated or reviewed since 2008. 19 of the 28 elementary schools are at or above their design capacity, and that includes the portable classrooms. The new elementary school is opening the beginning of the 21-22 school year. There are 177 portable classrooms being utilized district-wide. 12 of 28 elementary schools have misaligned feeder strands. There's inequitable educational program access, and then there's utilization imbalance. So a quick review of what the process entails. We had a project initiation with KSD leadership, and there was some data collection, and I'll talk about that more on the next slide. Then we interviewed KSD leadership. There was a community survey that had more than 7,500 respondents. Then there was an analyzation and discussion of the data. And then we created the interim report, which is what we're reviewing tonight. And then where we are right now in the process is the community engagement and input. And I want to make sure that I take a second to say the interim report is just that. It's an interim report. It's not a draft report because The report is finished, but it's interim, meaning that depending on what the community engagement and the input and the feedback, the questions from not only these community sessions, but also other engagement opportunities that are in the chat box or in the chat area, and we'll discuss later. Once we get all that feedback, compile it, based upon what we hear, we will make final report, make changes to the interim report for the final report and present it to the board. So all of those pieces there, as you can see in the graphic on the left, are incorporated to make that final report and recommendation. For data collection, collect and review initial district data, recent survey data, prior reports, plans, and other source documents pertinent to the study. Gathered school district information, including current school capacity, current school enrollment and enrollment policies, plan new school construction, additions, and renovations to existing facilities, current elementary, middle, high school boundaries and attendance zones, historical geocoded student data, current student transportation data, grade level configuration, school year schedule, reconfiguration and or addition history or policies, program participation, transfer policies, transportation patterns, and a few others. So the student family survey, the survey had a total of 7,579 respondents. The survey was offered and completed in 8 different languages, and survey respondents reported speaking 72 different languages at home. Of the 7,579, 7,081 respondents answered the race ethnicity question. Of those 7,081, 44.8% were white, 21.1% Asian, 11.2% Hispanic, Latino of any race, 10% 2 or more races, 9.3% Black or African American, 2.9% Native Hawaiian, other or Pacific Islander, and 0.8% American Indian, Alaskan Native. Survey participants represented students at every school throughout the district and at every grade level. And the top 4 most important factors in school boundaries reported by the respondents in order were: number 1, aligning elementary, middle school, and high school strands so that classes of students progress through the system together from kindergarten to high school. Number 2, reduce travel transportation issues. 3, balancing enrollment boundaries to address school capacity. And number 4, providing equitable access to programs across the district. Enrollment and capacity. KSD enrollment has remained stable over the last 5 years, apart from the 2021 school year, which is a little more than 4% lower when compared to the previous year. This downturn in enrollment can be mostly attributed to the COVID-19 pandemic and is in line with what school districts are experiencing across the nation. MGT projections indicate a rebound in enrollment for the 21-22 school year, assuming that there is a return to somewhat of a normal instruction, and only a slight decline over the following 4 years. The graph to the right illustrates the historical enrollment and the projected enrollment. And then it further breaks it down into grade bands, pre-K through 6, 7 through 8, and 9 through 12. Utilization is calculated by dividing the current or projected enrollment of an education facility by the capacity. As we noted earlier, 19 of the 28 elementary schools are at or above their design capacities. And that is including the portables, the 177 portables. So without those 177 portables, or if they were taking out the calculation, then the overutilization would probably be higher. Or, probably it would be higher. None of the middle schools are at or above their design capacity. And one of the 4 high schools is at or above its design capacity. And you can see on the graphics, this outlines it by the school and its current attendance boundary. And red is 100% utilized or higher. Blue is 99 to 90% utilized. And green is 89% utilization or lower. You can see the top one there is elementary, has a lot more at or over utilized schools than to the right, which is middle, or to the bottom, which is high school. Proposed boundary changes for the new elementary school. KSD has expended funds to design, plan, and construct a new elementary school located on the west side of the school district in what is now the Neely O'Brien attendance boundary. The new school will help with the overcrowding of Neely O'Brien Elementary, as well as several surrounding elementary schools. To create a boundary for the new elementary school, the surrounding elementary boundaries must be adjusted. And so if you look to the graphic on the right, it has 2 maps there. The one on the left is the current resides boundary, and the one on the right is the proposed resides boundary. The new elementary school takes up most of the northern half of the current Neely O'Brien. It takes some of Panther Lake, the little island district of Panther Lake. It takes a small portion of Springbrook Elementary, and then a very small piece of East Hill. And then Neely O'Brien is further adjusted, is adjusted more so that because so much of its area was taken by the new elementary school, we have to further adjust it. So it is, Neely O'Brien is moving into some of the boundary that is currently Kent, Scenic Hill. And then lastly, East Hill takes the northern piece of Meadow Ridge to balance the resides areas of all those elementary schools. If you look at the table on the bottom, it shows what the current resides numbers are, what the proposed resides numbers are, and then the change. And I want to take a second to point out that the difference between a resides and enrollment. So inside of the boundary, there are students whose addresses are in that boundary. That is considered a resides. The enrollment may be higher or lower depending upon students that live in that boundary that transfer to other schools, or from students that live outside that school boundary that transfer into that school. So I wanted to make sure that when I'm looking at these maps and these numbers, we're talking about the students that reside inside those boundaries. The interim report proposes moving 6th grade to middle school. As shown in the table, there are currently insufficient seats at the elementary level and excess seats at the middle and high school level. This proposal is necessary to achieve feeder pattern alignment, reduction of travel time and transportation issues, enrollment balance, and equitable access to programs across the district. It also helps to remedy misalignment with the state of Washington educational standards. The state of Washington's educational standards and their assessment standards right now structure K through 5, 6 through 8, and 9 through 12 grade bands. And if you look at the table there, especially the far right-hand side, you'll see that there is little more than 1,000 less seats than students at elementary school, and that does include those portables. Again, I know I sound like a broken record, but I just want to make sure that point is portrayed. Now, this option would require converting the current Kent Phoenix Academy, Kent Mountain View Academy back into a middle school after KPA, KMVA moves to their new building. As a result, there will be approximately 2,000 available seats at the middle school level for 6th grade to move into. Some proposed boundary changes to balance enrollment. Most elementary schools are at or above their design capacity. However, some elementary schools are below capacity or in geographic locations where their boundaries can be changed to help balance enrollment with neighboring schools. So the next few slides goes over a few of those schools that we're proposing that the boundaries change. The first two, the Cedar Valley and Jenkins Creek. The map to the left shows the current boundary, and the map to the right shows the proposed boundary. And the table shows the current, proposed resides, and the change. Again, resides is the students that live within inside the attendance boundary. And so this slide is looking at Covington, Grass Lake, and Horizon. Again, the map to the left is the current boundary. The map to the right is the proposed boundary. And then the table is the current resides, the proposed resides, and the change. And the slide's looking at Millennium, Pine Tree, and Meadow Ridge. Again, the map to the left is the current, the map to the right is the proposed. And the table shows the resides currently and proposed and the change. This slide shows changes for Sunrise and Meridian Elementary School. Again, the map to the left is the current boundary, to the right is the proposed, and the table shows the current resides, the proposed resides, and the amount of change. Proposed adjustment to Kentlake boundary. The Kentlake attendance boundary is very large because of the lower population density immediately surrounding the school. This has resulted in the attendance boundary being expanded to bolster enrollment. KSD administrators expressed concern regarding the travel time for some Kentlake students due to the large boundary area. KSD should consider magnet program opportunities at Kentlake to address the underutilization. And what I mean by that is, because we're proposing that the Kentlake boundary shrink a bit, then Kentlake is already underutilized as far as the high school and as a high school. So KSD should consider CTE programs, other magnet programs that will draw students out to Kentlake voluntarily. And then aligning feeder patterns. Aligning feeder patterns allow students to stay together with their peers through high school, which can create a sense of belonging, especially in areas such as sports, music, art, band, and extracurricular clubs. Educational programs can be then distributed equally into the 4 high school feeder strands, resulting in more equitable access. Allows educators from different grade levels to collaborate on instructional strategies and create pedagogy alignment vertically. And it was the #1 factor from the survey respondents when asked what their most important benefit would be from this review. And then that graphic to the right shows the current feeder strands. And as you can see, if you look at the top boxes there, there's 4 schools, and they feed wholly into a middle school. So you got Sawyer Woods, Grass Lake, Jenkins Creek, and Cedar Valley, for example, feed entirely into Cedar Heights, which feeds entirely into Kentlake. But then there are other schools, for example, Crestwood and Meridian Elementary School, They feed entirely into Madison Middle School, but then they split and go either to Kentlake or Kentwood High School. And then there are other examples where, for example, Millennium splits and goes to either Madison, Meridian, or Cedar Heights. And then in high school, either Kentlake or Kent Meridian. And so to fix that, we're proposing to align the feeder strands so that elementary schools will, all across the district, will feed entirely into the middle school, and then the middle school will feed entirely into the high school. So the graphic on the right is Kent Ridge, the proposed Kent Ridge feeder strand. It would have Northwood and Meeker, and then Northwood would have Fairwood, Ridgewood, Lake Youngs, and Sue's Creek. And Meeker would have Carriage Crest, Glen Ridge, Emerald Park, Panther Lake, and Springbrook. And the maps below are the high school, the middle school, and the elementary school attendance boundaries for those schools. And then this slide shows the Kentwood strand. So Matson and Meridian Middle School would feed into Kentwood. And then Crestwood, Covington, and Meridian Elementary School would feed into Matson Middle School. Sunrise, George T. Daniel, Martin Sorton, and Park Orchard would feed into Meridian Middle School. And again, the maps that are below show the attendance boundaries for each. And then the Kent Meridian, it would have Mill Creek, and then the new middle school, which would be located in the current Phoenix Academy building, would feed into Kent Meridian. And then Millennium, Meadow Ridge, Pine Tree, and Scenic Hills would feed to the new middle school. Kent, East Hill, Neely O'Brien, and the new elementary school would feed to Mill Creek Middle School. And again, the maps show their proposed boundaries. And then last slide for the feeder strands is Kentlake. There's only one middle school in the Kentlake strand, so Cedar Heights will feed into Kentlake, and Sawyer Woods, Grass Lake, Horizon, Jenkins Creek, and Cedar Valley would feed into Cedar Heights. And there's distribution of programs within the attendance strands. To resolve distribution inequity of educational programs, KSD should reduce the overcrowding of schools, align feeder strands, conduct a review of the educational programs and their accessibility to students, and then create a strategic and equitable distribution plan into the feeder strand. And then lastly, develop a process for continuous review to ensure the equitable distribution over time as demographics or need might shift. And that is the end of our presentation part, and I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Casey Price, and she is going to walk you through the engagement process through our Poll Everywhere software. So take it away, Casey.
Thanks, Rob. Let's give it one more second and see if our presentation comes back up. If not, we'll switch over to another screen. It takes just a second to load and connect. Perfect. So if everyone who's on the call tonight would like to join us, you can join us in one of two ways. By a web browser, you can go to pollev.com and enter MGT Consulting. That will allow you to respond to the activity. Or you can join us by text message. And it says text a code response. That code is actually text MGT Consulting to 22333. And so think of it this way. If you were calling your friend's phone number would be 22333. And the message that you want to send to your friend is MGT Consulting. Once you join, if you're joining us by text message, you should get a response that says that you've joined Casey Price's session. And so again, those instructions are on the top if you didn't catch it. It's pollev.com/MGT Consulting or text MGT Consulting to 22333. Once you've joined, you can answer these questions in real time. And so in this case, are you a parent or guardian of a student enrolled in KSD? Text A for yes, B for no, or C if you're a student in KSD. And while you're answering this question, just a reminder that answers to the poll are entirely anonymous. And so even if you join online and you enter your name, there's nothing being recorded on the back end. Everything is anonymous. We'll give everybody a few seconds to kind of get in and get situated. If you happen to text the wrong number or enter the wrong number, you can text undo, and it will undo your previous response and allow you to re-answer the question again. We'll give it about 10 more seconds. You'll want to get your last responses in so that it takes a second to load in. So make sure that you're getting those last responses in. Okay. And our next question is, what school does your student attend? And so you can text what school your student attends. Don't worry about those A's, B's, and C's that might still be rolling in. And we'll give this about 10 more seconds. All right. And our next question, I'll go ahead and read. Which of the following statements most closely represents your thoughts of the proposed boundary changes due to the opening of the new elementary school? Text A, if you like the changes and think they will benefit students. Text B, if you do not like the changes, but agree that they are necessary and will benefit students. Text C, if you do not like the changes and think they should be reevaluated. Or text D, if you do not have an opinion. And we'll give this one about 10 more seconds as well. Do you agree or disagree that portable classrooms are an acceptable option for overcrowded schools? Text A if you agree that they're an acceptable option for overcrowded schools. Text B if yes, but only temporarily. Text C for no, KSD should develop a plan to remove portables. And text D if you do not have an opinion. And we'll give this one about 10 more seconds as well. Knowing it is necessary to move the 6th grade to middle school to achieve feeder pattern alignment, reduction of travel time and transportation issues, enrollment balance, and equitable program access, which statement most closely represents your thoughts? Hang on one quick second. Let's activate this question. All right, there we go. Now, if you texted a question or a response, go ahead and text that again to make sure it looks like it's recording for you. Again, I'll reread the question and then the responses. Knowing it is necessary to move the 6th grade to middle school to achieve feeder pattern alignment, reduction of travel time and transportation issues, enrollment balance, and equitable program access, which statement most closely represents your thoughts? Text A, if you think 6th grade should move to middle school. Text B, if you do not like the idea but agree it is necessary. Text C, if you think 6th grade should remain in elementary school. And text D, if you do not have an opinion. And we'll give this about 10 more seconds as well. Which of the following statements most closely represents your thoughts of the proposed boundary changes to help balance enrollment in elementary schools? Text A, if you think the boundaries should change as proposed to balance enrollment. Text B, if you think the boundaries need to change, but the proposed changes need to be modified. Text C, if you think the boundaries should stay in their current configuration. or text D if you do not have an opinion. And we'll give this one about 10 more seconds. Which of the following statements most closely represents your thoughts of the proposed boundary changes to reduce the size of the Kentlake boundary? Text A, if you think the Kentlake boundary should change as proposed. Text B, if you think the Kentlake boundary should be changed, but not as proposed. Text C, if you think the Kentlake boundary should stay in its current configuration, or text D if you do not have an opinion. And again, we'll give this about 10 more seconds. Aligning KSD schools into the 4 high school strands so that classes of students progress through the system together from kindergarten to high school is the right thing to do. Text A, if you strongly agree. Text B, for agree somewhat. Text C, for neither agree or disagree. Text D, for I disagree somewhat. And text E, if you strongly disagree. And we'll give this one about 10 more seconds. Should educational programs such as inclusive education, highly capable, and dual language be distributed equitably so more students have access and limit transportation time? Text A, if your answer is yes, if it is financially feasible. Text B, For yes, regardless of cost to provide equitable access to all students. Text C for no, keep programs at a small number of central schools and transport students. Or text D if you do not have an opinion. And we'll give this one about 10 more seconds. And finally, using only one word or a hyphenated word, how would you describe the findings and proposed changes of this review as a whole? And as words start to come in, if you see words that you agree with, you can go ahead and text those in again, and it will make those words larger. You're also able to add words more than one time. And we'll give this about 10 more seconds as well.
Thank you, Casey. So just concluding remarks. Next steps, well, there's not any additional forums. This was the last forum. Today is the 10th. But you can participate in the thought exchange through this Saturday, December 12th. And you can find that on the KSD webpage. There's also on there some frequently asked questions and answers that have been received through this process. And they will add as many as they possibly can from tonight's. And then you can also, if you have other specific questions, you can email them to boundary@kent.k12.wa.us. And again, those will be added to the frequently asked and answered questions where appropriate. Where do we go from here? We're going to take all this input, we're going to compile it, and use it to work with the KSD leadership as well as the Board of Education to make make changes to the interim report that reflect some of those comments, and it can be used to benefit the school district and the students. We'll put that into a final report and present that to the board in January. And with that, that is the end of our presentation tonight. So I will hand over the helm to Dr. Behringer, who has a few closing remarks and a wrap up.
All right, thank you, Rob. And thank you, Rob and Casey from MGT for your report this evening and all your hard work throughout the last few months. Thank you again to Executive Cabinet, Central Office staff, those that are supporting us in this work on tonight's community forum. And thank you, of course, to all of you taking the time to join us this evening. I know that you could be doing other things, but you've taken the time to be with us, to ask your questions, to ensure that your voice is heard. We know that all questions haven't been answered, and as Rob said, we'll continue working on getting answers for those questions. So thank you very much for taking the time to join us tonight. Again, this is a process. It's a process that we are in the middle of, and as we continue to get feedback and work as a district team, we'll be looking at those questions, those comments, your feedback, as we work through this process to completion sometime in January. So with that said, what I'd like to do now is just kind of do a little recap of the poll everywhere questions. I know that as you're going through the questions and you're submitting via text, you don't always get to see the numbers, or maybe you're monitoring the chat. So I just wanted to kind of go through again, let everyone know where we're at with some numbers, because we will be using these numbers as we collect our data and look at all of our community sessions that we've had, as well as our thought exchange data and also the data from the boundary emails. First question is, are you a parent or guardian of a student enrolled in KSD? 77% of you said you were, 23% of you said that you were not. Of course, there were several responses from families all over the district, so we appreciate that. I'm not going to read through all the schools. Which of the following statements most closely represents your thoughts of the proposed boundary changes due to the opening of the new elementary school? 37% of you said, I like the changes and think they will be beneficial to students. 7% said, I don't like the changes, but I agree they are necessary and will benefit students. 50% of you said, I do not like the changes and think changes should be reevaluated. And 7% had did not have an opinion on that question. The next question was, do you agree or disagree that portable classrooms are an acceptable option for overcrowded schools? 6% of you agreed that portables were acceptable. 71% said yes, but only temporarily. 23% said no, KSD should develop a plan to remove those portables. Okay. The next question was, knowing it is necessary to move 6th grade to middle school to achieve fitter pattern alignment, reduction of travel time and transportation issues, enrollment balance, and equitable program access, which statement closely represents your thoughts? 45% of you said, I think moving 6th grade to the middle school is a good idea, or we should move 6th grade to the middle school, 45%. 13% said, I don't like the idea, but I agree it's necessary. 35% said, I think 6th grade should remain in the elementary school, and 7% did not have an opinion on that question. Which of the following statements most closely represents your thoughts of the proposed boundary changes to help balance enrollment in elementary schools? 38% said, I think boundaries should change as proposed to balance enrollment. 56% said, I think the boundaries need to change, but the proposed changes need to be modified. 0% said, I think the boundaries should stay the way they are. And 6% did not have an opinion. Which of the following statements most closely represents your thoughts of the proposed boundary changes to reduce the size of the Kentlake boundary? 29% said, I think the Kentlake boundary should change as proposed. 11% said, I think the Kentlake boundary should change, but not as proposed. 7% said, I think the Kentlake boundary should stay the same. And 54% did not have an opinion. The next question, aligning KSD schools into the 4 high school strands so classes of students progress through the system together from kindergarten to high school is the right thing to do. 42% strongly agreed. 36% agreed somewhat. 6% neither agreed nor disagreed, and 15% disagreed somewhat. Should educational programs such as inclusive education, highly capable, and dual language be distributed equally or equitably so more students have access and limit transportation time? 45% said yes, if financially feasible. 36% said yes, regardless of the cost, provide equitable access to all students. 15% said no, keep the programs at a small number of central schools and transport the students. 3% did not have an opinion. The last one was the words used to describe the findings and the proposed changes of this review as a whole. And I tried to keep up as quickly as I could, and these are in no particular order, so it's not the largest or the smallest, but I took what I could see as the top 8 or 9 largest words I saw before they went off the screen. Frustrating, rushed, necessary, interesting, overdue, incomplete, reasonable, and disappointing. That was the recap of the poll everywhere. I see we have a couple minutes left. What I'd like to do is just answer or share 1 or 2 FAQs that maybe have not been shared or you maybe have not been able to access yet. First one being, 5th graders should not be moved in a pandemic. They potentially will have last attended school when they were only 4th graders. They've fallen behind academically and aren't ready for academic success in middle school. That was the statement. The response is, fall of 2021 will be a big year for many students. Transitions will be happening for students at multiple grades. They will be moving to middle school and high school, as well as filling our new school buildings. As a matter of fact, all students moving to middle school next year, if we go to school in person in the fall of 21, will all be brand new to the middle school. All 8th graders will be new to the middle school, all 7th graders will be new to the middle school, and all 6th graders would be new to the middle school. If the board chooses to move 6th grade to the middle school, KSD will work to make all students feel a part of their schools. In the new path model proposed, students shifting grade levels to middle school or high school will get to move up with their classmates. So also, I know that the principals in those schools, the teachers in those schools, and the PTSAs in those schools are going to be very supportive of the families and the students that are moving from 6th grade into the middle school, if that is the case. I know there'll be plans for support to support the well-being, social, emotional transition, as well as the academic transition for those students. The last question is, why are Kentlake boundaries recommended to be reduced? The Kentlake boundary area is very large because of the lower population density immediately surrounding the school, resulting in the current attendance boundary being larger to bolster enrollment. Reducing the Kentlake attendance boundary will reduce travel time for some students closer to another high school. It'll reduce the enrollment of Kentlake, which is already underutilized compared to other high schools. It will also potentially create an opportunity for students to be in a school that have access to public transportation, for them to be able to participate in after-school activities, clubs, and athletics. Okay, that concludes our meeting this evening. Thank you all very much for your time. Please continue to ask questions through the boundary email, and also through the thought exchange until 6 p.m. on Saturday. Thank you again. We appreciate your time and your voice. Have a good night.